All right, welcome to the Speaker Showcase featuring Kelly Swanson. I'm Jonathan Lamb, District Growth and Support Director at Toastmasters International. It is my pleasure to moderate today's live Q&A session. As noted earlier, to ask Kelly a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Type in your question and hit send. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Once again, it's my pleasure to introduce Kelly Swanson. Kelly is the author of Who Hijacked My Fairy Tale? The Land of If Only, The Story Formula, and The Gutsy Girl Pocket Guide to Public Speaking. She was a featured entertainer for Holland America Cruise Lines and has keynoted major conferences and corporate events from coast to coast. In January, she launched the premiere of her new one-woman show, Who Hijacked My Fairy Tale, which will be appearing in theaters across the U.S. Kelly's education session titled The Power of Story is available to watch on demand, and we're honored she is joining us live today. Please welcome Kelly Swanson.
Hey, Jonathan. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to be here, even though it is early where I am, but there is no group I would rather get up early for than my fellow Toastmasters. So wonderful. Thanks for coming. I'm here to answer any questions that you have about story. We'll dig in. I could talk a week about it, so I'll try to just hit the points that I think bring you the most value. The free gift link that we're giving you has the book in it, so you can go deeper. And of course, the session tells you what I would have told you from a training perspective. So we're all good to go. Jonathan, how should we get started on the questions?
Awesome. Well, we do have a few questions already. Your session was all about why stories work and give you the ability to influence on a higher level of persuasion than just the data alone. So now let's talk about how story works. What makes a great story?
Well, that's a big question. I get asked that all the time. People come to me giving me their stories. I've got this story, that story. Is this a good one? Is that a good one? And I always tell them, you're asking the wrong question. Don't ask if it's the best story. I mean, maybe if you're in a competition, you might, but out there in the real world where we're trying to use our stories to persuade in life and in business, it's not about who has the best story. It's about having the right story. It's a tool. It's a tool to do what you need it to do, and to tap into their emotion and to reach them on a deeper level. So ask, is it the story that this person I'm trying to persuade can relate to? Does the character in my story have an emotion and a desire and a pain that is very similar to the one that the person I'm talking to has? Can they identify with the conflict in this story? And can I walk them through it to a point where they will see that what I have will make their lives better? Stories are all about transformational change in people. It's not always about who's the best entertainer and can get the most laughs in a short amount of time. Great question. So it's not about the best story or even finding a good story. Find the right story and then make it great.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kelly. What about for those that don't have too many life experiences, that don't have too many stories to share or to relate to? Do you have any guides or suggestions to that?
I do. I will push back and say, you might have more stories than you realize. We all have life experiences, every single one of us. The problem is that we get into the speaking world or whatever world we're in, and we think our stories aren't strong enough or big enough. Because, I mean, shoot, I'm a motivational speaker. My peers have climbed mountains. They've won awards. They've fought battles. I mean, I can't compete with that. And when I finally stopped trying to and said, Kelly, what have you been through in your life that really taught you something? Then those simple stories about being a mom, or a simple story about wanting to start a business and having no idea what I was doing. The simple stories about being under lockdown and everything I know about my business has now disappeared. Every job I had for the rest of the year got canceled. So when you're talking about that, everybody has a story, and every story matters to the one who needs to hear it. So the issue isn't really that you don't have stories, it's that you're not sure how to find them. And let me give you a simple way to find those stories that are already there. Because I said story is a tool that is used to elicit a response or persuade, then of course we're going to be intentional about what kinds of stories we're going to pick. And let me go so far as to say, when we're using it for persuasion, we're starting with the end in mind, meaning we know the point we want to make. We know the lesson we want to teach. We know the data. So for example, maybe I want to get in front of a group of people and tell them, let's just say I'm in the world of finance, and tell them, you better save your money now before it's too late. Let's just say that's my lesson. So I'm going to go into my life and go, where did I learn that lesson the hard way? Or did somebody I know learn that lesson the hard way? Go to that example, and there's a story there. Story is simply a real life illustration. It's a point. Let me say it better. Story is, well, maybe I won't. Story is the way you illustrate your point by putting a face on it. It's just an example. When people come to me and they have entire presentations, bodies of work with no stories whatsoever, the first thing I have them do is this exercise to just tap into their creativity. And that's to get out a piece of paper or computer, I like paper still, and write down, if you were going to leave your advice to the world, maybe it's to your child, to a niece, to a neighbor, or just to the universe. Let's say, to be morbid, your time is numbered and you're about to leave this world, but you want to put on paper the things that you have learned the most. Make a list, 5 to 10 things that you know you would want to tell somebody. Love before it's too late. Take advantage of the kids' moments. They go by fast. Whatever that is, write down that list of lessons you'd leave to the world. And then for each one, because I believe those are the things, if you believe about them most, they're not just talking points. They are from your heart and from your life and from your experience. They are what your father taught you, or your grandfather taught you, or what you lived out in the trials and the tribulations of your life. That is a great starting point, because in every lesson, there will be a story. And so you've got a beautiful launching point right there. One other thing I'll say about it is, another way to the stories is to go to the highlights or the milestones of your life. First car, first job, the firsts, the first day at of high school, your first love, your first heartbreak. Those are often moments where there is great story material. It's almost as if you're flipping through the scrapbook of the memories of your life. What are the moments that would pop up? There's a story in every one of them. And I know that everybody listening has that scrapbook that contains the memories of their life, and that in every memory, it taught you something. You didn't ask this question, but I'm going to go ahead and say, every story has a point. You were telling a story, not just to tell it and go, isn't that funny? The story is told in the world of persuasion because there is a reason you are telling it, and an action and a lesson you want me to get from that story. Know that going into the story, and it will be much easier to put it together and to deliver it.
Kelly, what about those that are shy? How do you bring out the stories of those individuals that are just not comfortable or a
No,
bit timid?
I know that's tough, and you're not going to believe it probably, but I'm an introvert. I grew up most of my life very shy. I was a picked on kid. And so that makes you, when you're bullied to a degree, you don't want anybody to notice you. So my whole world was about disappearing, not being seen. So I get it. I was very nervous in the beginning and very shy. I will say it's a learned skill, well, join Toastmasters. Hello, they will help teach you. I know that if any of you are new, get involved in Toastmasters. It is the best way to help you come out of your shell. But let me give you a quick answer for those of you who it's painful to get up there, it's shy, it's whatever. Number one, it's a mindset thing. I hope this doesn't sound weird, but you're serving someone. And with your message and your truth and your information, you're not coming up there to perform and be judged. Well, unless it's a competition. You're not coming up there to be judged and to perform. You're coming in front of somebody because you have something that they need that will make their life better. You are someone else's drink of water. So the first thing is to embrace the fact that you're simply the vessel for the truth you've been sent to deliver. You're not here to be judged on how well you do it. You're here to serve. Sometimes I joke and say, if I go to the soup kitchen in the United States, that's a place for those of you in other countries where you go feed those who may not have a place to live or who may not have food. When you go serve, you don't worry how good your hair looks or whether you've got the right headshot or whether you don't worry about all of that because you're serving. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that audiences they're on your side more than they're against you. So understand, they're not waiting to see you fail. Half of them aren't even listening. Half of them are so glad they're not up there. They're not your enemies. They're your friends in an audience. They're people just like you. One thing that helps me, especially in the beginning or when I'm very nervous about something, is instead of talking to the many, I talk to the one. And whether it's on a camera or whether it's in person, 1,000 people is many. 15 can be many. Talk to the one. And by that, I mean the one person who is sitting exactly where you were and who needs to hear this and who is hanging on by a thread and who needs what you have. Talk to them as if you're sitting across the table having a meal together. And that's the last thing I'll say about that. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Another thing I'll say, and this is hard for the shy people, but if you can find a way to walk around the room and make some friends before you get up there and speak, it will serve you well. And then when you get up there, you just go talk to the two people you met in the hallway, and that will help calm your nerves. All right, Jonathan, I think that's probably enough for that question.
Those are some great tips, and comforting to hear that, there's people out there that are supportive, right? When telling your story or drafting your story, is it okay to put negative stories in there as well, or does every story have to be positive?
No. In fact, no, the negative stories, I don't know that I would even call it negative because I'm immediately going, wait, what do you mean by that? So let's reframe it. Stories that are vulnerable, stories about the pain in your life is probably what you might be referring to. And some people have some really painful stories, and it's hard to know, is it okay to tell them here? I believe personally that this is all about connection with other human beings, and that when we bear a tiny piece of our soul, we open the door for a relationship with a stranger. Now, I can't tell you on a stage or in your business or wherever you're using stories how much you want to bear of your soul. That's your decision. There may be there are stories I will never tell somebody. There are stories I tell that happened to me that maybe somebody else would never do that. The one thing, don't count my ums and so's, I'm working on it. The one thing, I want to say two things about painful stories. I want to say, when you use them, be very careful with them. Spend time in how you craft it, how you tell it, where you're taking your audience who may have been there and what this may be triggering, how to wrap it in some humor and some things that not make the topic funny, but some things that wrap it in a way that gives them a release from such heavy information. I would also say, don't tell a story you're not through bleeding from. Or another way to say it, tell the story when you're ready, not before, and when you have found the gift in it. Because the point of the painful story is to tell other people in a similar position of pain how to get out. So if I'm telling you a story of something very painful that happened to me in college, for instance, in my theater show, for instance, I have a story, and I don't want to tell you because I don't want that, you got to go to the theater to see it. But something painful happened to me in college. And it became part of my whole story. Was about thinking it was all about meeting the prince, looking like a princess, getting a castle, and living happily ever after, like the fairy tale told me as a young girl I should have. So it was a very dark moment where I saw that I wasn't a princess, that I wasn't going to get a prince, and that everybody knows it. Now that's a negative story. By what I know, I just said don't call it negative, but that's painful. There's nothing fun about that story. And when I first wanted to tell it, I didn't know where to go with it. And a friend said, you can't leave it there. You're not ready to tell this story because you haven't found the gift in it yet. You have not healed from it yet. And you don't know what the lesson in it is. And so I really had to go explore, because I knew I was on the other side of it, and that I had realized further in my life that I was worthy, that I was good enough. And I won't go deep into it. But the point I'm trying to make is we take them to these dark places so that we can show them the light. So we want to make sure our painful story brings them to a positive place. I will also say there's a time and a place for things. Maybe this story is good, but it's not good for this group, or it's not good for this, or whatever. I want to give you one example, and then I'll shut up because I know we're getting close to time. I have a friend who shot away. She's big into business, speaking to corporate groups, executives, people at the top of that ladder. And so she always believed that you wouldn't go to them with stories about your personal life. You wouldn't go to stories about trips you'd been on. You stuck to business stories. And she was quite successful doing that. And we were working on one of her upcoming speeches, and she was inadvertently told me about a time when she was going through a tough time in her own life, and her friend dragged her to another country on a mission trip and how she said she was in the area where people were very poor. And she said, here she is at a time where she's wallowing in her own self-pity, surrounded by all these, and she tells it much better, all these people who were living with nothing, and how they all shut down at about noon to celebrate and to praise and to honor what they had. And she said, Kelly, it was such a life-changing moment for me to see these people with nothing stop to celebrate as if they had everything. And she said, it changed my life. And I said, why do you feel like you, I said, I want you to go tell that to these corporate people, because the lesson is exactly what you want them to get. She goes, oh, well, I can't tell a personal story. I said, please take the last 4 minutes. You've done all your content. Just say, I'd like to close with a personal story, if I may. And she did. She called me up later. She goes, Kelly, you would not believe. She said, people went crazy. I got a standing ovation. They were lining up to buy my books. They were coming up to me in the elevators. She said, it was totally different from anything I'd ever experienced before. And I said, because you got honest and vulnerable. And it might have been the most powerful thing you had ever done for those executives. So I can't tell you what kind of stories you should tell, but I also want to say, don't be afraid of bearing your soul if it's with the intention to serve the message you've been sent to bring.
So kind of staying on the similar note, how can our attendees incorporate the power of story into the professional lives? Maybe, you know, if I'm working sales, how do I incorporate that in my sales technique or my pitch? So yeah, any ways to use that storytelling to really impact our professional lives?
Sure, sure. Go read the book that I've put in the free gift, The Story Formula. It will go deep into that because it will tell you how to tell your story, your brand story, and your customer story all at the same time. It comes with that. Asking where we can use story in our businesses is a big question because we can use them anywhere. I'll often ask people when I'm speaking to a diverse audience, who are you trying to persuade? And what are you in leadership? Are you in customer service? Are you in sales? Are you in IT? What we come to find, what I believe is that, and this is very similar to the story that's in the training video I told y'all. So if you haven't seen that, go watch that because I make the case, I think I do anyway, that every single one of us is in the business of persuasion. We are all trying to get other people to do what we want or to just simply influence and impact the world from where we sit. And if you agree with you're trying to persuade someone, no matter what that application is to your business, the next place I would take you is that without explaining it, to persuade, you better be able to connect and engage on an emotional level. Nothing you tell them, no shaking of your fist, no list of this is what you need to do is going to do that. Only stories have the ability to do that. So now if you understand that this is the most powerful tool you have in your arsenal to persuade in business, it becomes how can I use a story in this way? I'm having a team meeting with my employees. They're all virtual. They're located all over the world. I need them to know we've got their back. I need them to know that we are in this together. I need them to know we've been through harder times than this before. Find a story that shows that. Tell a story as a leader about a time you went through a hard time and you made through it, and so will we. If you're in sales, the first part of sales is you sell you first. So if you're connecting and engaging with your buyer, you need to create rapport. You need them to see you as a human, to see the brand you represent with a face, and for you to be able to tell their story. Stories are magnificent tools to be used in sales. If you're in customer service, telling people we understand, or it's just policy or whatever, doesn't necessarily serve your customers as well as a story can be. Oh, Sarah, I understand what you're going through. I went through something like this myself. Are other customers going through this? Again, it's connection and engagement. If it's marketing, look at television, look at advertising. Stories are the way that we sell our products. That's a short answer. I believe story has, even with our children, in our personal lives or as a speaker. I am only as impactful as the stories I tell. And I have seen this, Jonathan, when I do social media, I can write a gazillion articles and people be like, that's nice, thanks, like, emoji. But I do a chub rub story on Goalcast about the time my sequin thighs rubbed together at a networking event and I was humiliated. Goalcast takes that story, puts it on their page, and in 48 hours, we had over 1 million views and it had been shared 10,000 times. I fully believe the story is what gets their attention, what keeps it, and what enables you to rise above the noise in a competitive market where everybody's shouting. I believe even in virtual, too many of us are going into it. Maybe I even did it today, but too many of us are going into the virtual realm thinking that people only want the information. Oh no, you only have a camera now. You've got to be able to grab into their soul from that camera. You better be using stories because it will hold their attention longer. And don't think that people are so fatigued they don't want to get on a meeting anymore that you can't compel and engage, because when they're off that meeting, they're on their devices for the rest of the day, binge watching a guy with a mullet and a tiger. I'm just saying.
So talking about the engaging and the power behind using a story, is there a best time to incorporate the story at the beginning, middle, like where in the speech is it the best?
Okay, it depends on how long your speech is. If it's 5 to 7 minutes, that's different. But most of my speeches are an hour or 90 minutes and or 45 minutes. I like to have a good, just like a conference, the biggest moments are the opening and the closing. And so in a speech, same thing. The biggest moments are your open and your closes. That's what's remembered the longest. In a comedy bit, the comedians put their best joke last and their second best joke first. So those bookends are very important. So when I'm writing a speech, I like to have a good story somewhere near the beginning, a good story somewhere near the end, and a good story somewhere in the middle. And those stories can look like a million different things. But if I could only put it one place, that's tough, but you need one at the beginning. And here's why. Because the beginning is where you create your trust and get their arms lowered, get their buy-in to what you're saying. I believe everybody should have a bigger why story at the beginning of their presentation. Too many people assume that your audience is already buying into it and you haven't gotten them on board with why this matters. So I think the opening 5 to 10 minutes of a speech is so critical to create rapport, to become human to them, to explain why this matters to you and this matters to the world, to tap into the pain they have and what happens if they don't fix it. And all this stuff is in my book. So if you're like, ah, it's all there spelled out. But yes, I would say storytelling is very important in the opening. And as an example, I saw somebody once give a speech that, I'm sorry, I yawned all the way through. I think I slept half. They lost my attention and never got it back. And people were leaving. It was just not a good presentation. And then at the very end, the person told a riveting personal story about why all this matters to her. And I thought to myself, why in the world did you tell me that last? If you'd have told it to me first, I would have opened up to listen to everything you had to say because you would have made a personal connection with me first. The salesperson, we're all salespeople if we're selling our truth, so to speak, persuading. The salesperson does not walk into the office and get to know the client before they leave. They do it in the beginning. They look for common ground. That's what story is. They look for common ground in the office, in your life. What do we have in common? And no matter where we live, no matter what our culture is, no matter where we stand in terms of political beliefs or religious beliefs, we always have something in common with the people that we're trying to persuade. And that's what story is. It's the bridge that connects us to see what makes us more alike than what makes us different. I always say, don't shake your fist and tell me what to believe. But if you tell me your story, I can't argue with it. I climb right into your world and I see it as if you've given me virtual reality glasses. And then suddenly I can understand more of what life looks like from where you sit. And I'm less likely to judge. And I'm more open to listen to what you have to say.
With just a couple minutes left, what are some of the bigger mistakes that you've observed through your time that we could probably leave with our leave as the takeaway with our attendees?
Sure. The biggest mistakes I see are not understanding how the tool works. So have you ever heard a story that just went all over the place and they rambled and you weren't sure why they were telling it or what you were supposed to get out of it? Every story my mother tells, bless her heart, starts with what she had for lunch 2 weeks ago. So the one mistake is not knowing the structure of the story, where it's going and the point and why you're telling it and what I'm supposed to get out of it. That's one. That I'll call structure. Number two, one of the biggest mistakes I see is that people step outside of their story and tell it very matter of fact. And I always say a list of facts is not a story. A story is about somebody, and this is in the book, who goes through a conflict and there's an emotion attached and there's a resolution to it and there's another emotion. You have to stand inside that story and feel it again and tell it to me. That's storytelling, not reciting it facts as if it were a grocery list. I'm going to connect to it more if I feel like you're in it. People ask me, they're like, Kelly, I've heard you tell that story 100 times, and every time I love it. Why is that? I said, because every time I'm in it and I'm seeing it and I'm feeling the woman with the mop dancing her way across the marble floors of her hospital lobby while the beeps of the monitors and the dings of the elevators sing to her in sweet harmony. And I could smell the perfume of my changed perspective as I watched that woman turn her job into an art. When you tell a story, don't just tell me, show me. Give me details. If I can't see it, I'm not in it. So when you tell a story, give me a few details about the characters, what they look like. Use all the senses. Really, there's no right or wrong, except just not taking me there at all. Those are a few of the things, and making it too long. Less is more. And thanks to Toastmasters, most of you will not have the problem that most speakers have, because Toastmasters will say, no, you got to do it in 5 to 7 minutes. That's the best exercise, is to get that story down to 5 minutes, because and stories can be longer, they can be shorter, but that's a good rule of thumb, because if you have to tell it in 5 minutes, you are going to naturally tell that story. Now, one more thing too, talk the way you talk. Connecting is like story. I tell people speeches are conversations, not performances. So write and talk the way you talk without all the ums and so's that I used today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Obviously, there's been a lot of questions. We cannot get to all of them. What is one way our attendees could to connect with you?
Okay, LinkedIn is a great place.
Okay.
And I answer all my messages. It takes me a while, but I answer all my messages on LinkedIn. So you can get in touch with me there. The free gift that you have has an option to stay in touch, maybe even to send a message. I'm quite my social media, my Facebook pages are full, so I can't let any new people in. There's just not enough room. So look for me on LinkedIn and go get the free gift. And there are a lot of resources that will answer a lot of your remaining questions. But just Google me. There's what do you call that thing? Website has a contact form too, and I'm pretty accessible. It just may sometimes take me a while, but I got a lot more time than I did last year.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly, for your time today, and thank you to everyone attending this speaker showcase. Once again, if you have not already watched Kelly's education session, please watch it. It's titled "The Power of Story," and download the free gift. So thank you once again, Kelly, for your time today, and thank you for everyone for joining us.
Be
Have a
well and
great
be
day.
safe, everybody.